All right, so what we're going to start with now is going to be the light and the dark reactions. So we're going to just get into a little bit more detail about how they work. So we'll start with the light dependent reactions. So here you can see that it's going to have 5 stages. Now remember, the whole point of light dependent reactions is to make two things, ATP and NADPH. So we need electrons and we need energy. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is what's called the primary photo event. So anytime you see the word photo, that means light. So we've got a photon of light getting captured by a pigment, and that's going to excite electrons and move electrons into an excited state. Okay, so if we look over here, actually, let's look at this one. Here's our primary photo event. You've got the photon of light coming, and it's exciting all of these electrons, okay? And so what's going to happen is when it excites this one, it's going to excite this one, and so on and so on. So it's going to get passed around. Then the next part is going to be called charge separation. So all of that energy is going to end up at a reaction center. And that's going to be in photosystem 2, because remember, photosystem 2 is going to function first. And what that's going to do is that's going to transfer one energized electron to an acceptor molecule and then start electron transport. So back here, let's go to this slide. Here we've got, where's my pointer? Okay, here we've got our light coming in, exciting the electrons. That was stage 1. Now the charge separation is going to be this right here. So you've got the electron getting brought over here, and what's going to happen is that electron is going to go to this acceptor molecule. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of similar terms from here to cell respiration that we've talked about. Now the next part is called an electron transport chain, and you should remember what that is, right? So the electron transport chain is going to be where the electron that got brought to this acceptor molecule is going to go through it, and it's going to bounce through, and it's going to do the same thing that you learned about in cell respiration. So it's going to cause ATP synthase to turn because all of those protons are going to get on one side of the membrane and want to come through to the other side. So if we look back here, we've got our electron transport chain happening. The excited electrons are going to go through the electron carrier molecules, and that's going to create that proton gradient, which is those H pluses building up on one side of the membrane. Then the next part is called chemiosmosis, just like it was in cell respiration. So those protons are going to go through the ATP synthase, and that's going to make ATP. Okay, so you can see here we've made ATP. Now that's going to be the 4th stage. Now the next one, if you look in our notes, is going to be a second electron transport chain. So here we go again. You've got light hitting the acceptor, the electrons, getting them excited. The electrons are going to get passed up here. Now we have a second electron transport chain, and what that's going to do is not chemiosmosis, but that's going to make NADPH. So now we have ATP that was created in that first electron transport chain, and NADPH, which was made in the second electron transport chain, and now we've done our light reactions. We've got the products of our light reactions that can be used in the dark reactions called the Calvin cycle. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how photosystems work. So photosystem, if we're going to look at a picture of it, is going to look like this. This entire purple thing here is going to be a photosystem. And the first part we're going to talk about is going to be what's called an antenna complex. Now, if you think of any sort of antenna you can think of, the whole point of that antenna is to attract waves, right? So this antenna complex is going to be a collection of pigments that are going to gather photons of light, which travel, as we learned, in waves. So we've got our antenna complex being these pigment molecules that you see out here. Now the other part of it, that center part, is called the reaction center. And so that's where the energy is going to excite those electrons, and then they're going to get channeled to do their chemical work, which is the electron transport chain. So this light purple stuff right here is the reaction center complex. So the dark purple is going to be the antenna complex, and the little center part is going to be the reaction center. All right. So just to go over those light reactions again, a couple of important things that are happening. We're removing hydrogen from water to make oxygen, and we're also providing electrons. We're using sunlight to make ATP and NADPH. So the technical term for making ATP in photosynthesis is called photophosphorylation. Lovely word, super long, but photo means using light. Phosphorylation is talking about adding a phosphate onto ADP to make ATP. So that's where that word comes from. And then NADPH is energized electrons, and remember that's going to be important for our dark reactions. Okay, so all of this we've talked about. So the dark reactions, all I really want you to get out of that, and it's also, don't forget, called the Calvin cycle and also carbon fixation. The whole point of that is to use NADPH and ATP to take carbon dioxide and actually make it into glucose. Now, technically, it makes it into G3P first, and then it turns it into glucose. So that's all I really want you to get out of the Calvin cycle. The last little part that we're going to talk about here is going to be alternative forms of carbon fixation. So other ways that plants can do carbon fixation. So carbon fixation is talking about the dark reactions. So most plants are going to be what's called C3 plants, and what that means is they are going to make that G3P before they make the glucose. So that's a very common way for plants to do it. So rice, wheat, soybeans are going to be important examples of that agriculturally. Now, we also have what are called C4 plants. And so instead of making a 3-carbon compound before they make glucose, they make a 4-carbon compound. That's where C4 comes from. And so just a different way of doing it, and sugarcane and corn are going to be members of the grass family that are examples of that. And then the last type is the funky one, and those are called CAM plants. And what CAM plants do is they only take CO2 in at night, and that's just because they grow in areas that are very, very hot, like the desert. And so that obviously is going to be an advantage to only do it at night, because they don't want to open those stomata, those little openings in the leaves, until it is nighttime, so they won't lose as much water. And so what they do is they're going to store CO2 at night until it's needed after those light reactions that happen during the day. So it's called crassulation acid metabolism, and for short we call it CAM. And so we say the plants that do that are called CAM plants. And so if you think about anything that can grow in really hot and dry environments, like cactus, succulents, aloe, and pineapple plants. So all of those are going to take in CO2 only at night, whereas all these other plants we talked about are going to take them in during the day and at night. So that's really photosynthesis, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. I will also try to post a photosynthesis video, but I do want to warn you it gets a little bit too in-depth than what we're learning in here.